My name is Thomas Edgell. I'm here with Jonathan Quinn, and we're here to present on building your first web GIS. Now, I know that our title is called Building Your First Web GIS, but for this presentation, we are going to be focusing on ArcGIS Enterprise instead of ArcGIS Online. If you came here looking for advice on ArcGIS Online, that won't be the topic of this presentation. Everybody out in the area in the showcase is able to assist with that, but we are going to be focusing on Enterprise. So with that, I guess we'll be presenting Building Your First ArcGIS Enterprise instead. So for this presentation, we're going to talk about the different WebGIS options you've got with Esri. And then we're going to go into a base ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. We're going to go into the steps needed to build this, involving preparing those components, configuring them, and then some administration of your ArcGIS Enterprise. And we'll do some demos along the way. So to start, here at Esri, we've got two different WebGIS offerings. We've got ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. Like I said, we're focusing on ArcGIS Enterprise, which is essentially establishing WebGIS inside of your own infrastructure. It is software which you are in control of when to install and when to upgrade, so it's all done manually. So as a result, there's a little bit more of an administrative overhead involved. Now, you might be wondering, you know, what is WebGIS, or what is ArcGIS Enterprise if you've not seen it before? Actually, I'd like to poll the room. How many here have used ArcGIS Enterprise before, or Portal for ArcGIS? Okay, great. So about half. So I think for some of this, it will be very new. Some of this content will be new for some of you. So we wanted to go into a brief demo of what you can accomplish with ArcGIS Enterprise to start. All right. So what I'm going to go through is possibly just a typical workflow that someone would go through when working with, I'm going to switch. When working with a WebGIS or an ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. So let's say that as a user, let's make this a little bit bigger. As a user, I'm not really a power user of GIS. I don't have ArcMap. I don't really know how to publish. My administrator may not trust me to publish the right things or set the right settings. So, but I still have some data that I want to display in a WebGIS. So I want to display within Portal. So in this case, I have an Excel sheet of points of interest within Redlands. It's got, I know it has a spatial component to it. In this case, either street information, city, state, zip code information, let's make that a little bigger, or latitude and longitude fields. So I know that, well, I can put this on a map somehow. So with the WebGIS, you can easily bring this data into a web map and display it spatially. So if I'm already connected to a pre-existing ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. And what I'll do within ArcGIS Maps for Office, extension in Excel, I'll click on the Sign In button. Here I have a named user within a portal. In this case, my user is a publisher, and I will provide my credentials to sign in. And once I sign in, I have a new option available for me to create a new map. So I'll click on that option to add a map. And once the map comes up, it gives me the option to add some data to this map. In this case, I want to use the data that's available that I have within this Excel sheet. So I'll select the cell range that I want to use within this for this data, and I'll click OK. The next window provides me some different options for me to configure how I want to add this data to the map. This second option here is the location format. This is if I want to, let's say geocode using address information or even display. In this case, I'm going to use the coordinates that I have within this data to display the data within the map. If you click on location format, I have some information about, or I have the option to set what fields I want to use for the data. In this case, I have latitude, longitude, and decimal degrees. So I'm just going to leave the option to use WGS84 enabled. I'll click on OK. Next, I can take advantage of smart mapping. So what this allows me to do is I have this type column, and I can easily select that column to use for the display of the points within this data. And then I'll leave the option of unique symbols, as I have those as set as unique symbols within the field, and I'll click on Add Data. Allows me to confirm, and then once I've confirmed, you see that I can easily display the data within my Excel sheet in a map. This gives me the option to update some of the symbology. I'm just going to leave the default and click OK. Here I'll give it a more user-friendly name. I'll call it Redlands Points of Interest. And what I can do next is by default, pop-ups are automatically enabled. Pop-ups allow you to take a look at the attributes within individual points. So if I click on a point, I see some attribute information has come up for the point. I'm going to go ahead and customize it. I just want to get rid of the longitude and latitude fields. And I'll click on OK. So now you see that it's a little bit more of a, I got rid of those fields as they didn't really provide much to the attributes for this data. So once I've authored my map as I'd like it to look, I can go ahead and share it. So I can click on Share Map, and here I'll provide a title for the web map that's going to be created in the portal. I'll provide some tags, in this case just Redlands POI. In the summary, I'll just use the title. I'm going to go ahead and share this with everybody. Once I'm done, I'll click on Share. So this may take a few seconds, but what's happening behind the scenes is it's creating a web map. And it's also creating a hosted feature service. And we're going to go into more information about what's actually required within your ArcGIS Enterprise deployment to actually create this hosted feature service. But this data is essentially getting copied into the portal. And within the what we call the ArcGIS data store. And once the publishing goes through, or the sharing goes through, I'll be able to access this web map as well as the data behind it in a browser. And all the data isn't coming from Excel anymore. It's coming from the portal. So I can, if editing is supposed to happen on this data, I can go ahead and edit. Looks like the sharing is complete. So at the bottom and left here, there's a link to open the map. And if I click on that link, it opens in a browser. And it's essentially just opening the item information page for the web map. And here you see there's a layer, an operational layer within this web map. And that's pointing to that point layer that I created. This also has a base map. And if I click on Open in Map Viewer, then when it opens up, you see there's my data, and this is drawing dynamically from the server that's behind the portal. And we're going to go obviously into more information about deploying your the ArcGIS Enterprise, but the pop-up's already configured from what I had configured within Azure Maps for Office. So again, this is just a quick glimpse of what you can do when you have a full ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. So with that.
Great, thanks, John. So ArcGIS Enterprise is comprised of 4 different components that we all used. We use these components in this demo, and they all require a little bit of configuration. We've got the web adapter, portal for ArcGIS, ArcGIS server, and the ArcGIS data store. Now, these were all products that were previously available in other versions of our product, but at 10.5, they're all bundled together under the name of ArcGIS Enterprise. But what are these components? Well, let's start with the web adapter. So the web adapter is a Esri-built load balancer. What it does is it directs network traffic, and it serves as a reverse proxy for access to your enterprise. It comes in 2 different versions, IIS and Java. The IIS version runs in Windows or Microsoft IIS, and the Java version runs on a Java-based web server, such as Tomcat or WebLogic. Does anybody in the room have any experience with web servers or web server technology? Couple? Awesome. Well, this product is designed to make this as simple as possible for you. It sits on your web server, and it redirects traffic to the internal ports which are used by our ArcGIS Enterprise. Next, we have Portal. So this provides the web front end for a user's WebGIS experience, and it may be familiar to anybody who's worked with ArcGIS online. It's got the same user feel, same interface. It provides the infrastructure backend for your WebGIS as well. It gives you a content management system where you can create maps, applications, and web services. And it also lets you search for this content within your ArcGIS enterprise, so you can find data that other people on your team have worked with. You can also add services or content from external sources and add them into your portal so that they're items that you can also search and use in maps or apps as well. Next, we've got ArcGIS Server. Previous users of ArcGIS Server might be the most familiar with this, but we kind of consider this the engine of your WebGIS. It allows you to web enable your data, supports a number of different service types, and it provides analytical capabilities for your ArcGIS enterprise once everything's configured. Now, ArcGIS Server has many different licensing roles, which you may have heard about in previous sessions. But for the base ArcGIS enterprise deployment, we require the GIS server licensing role for ArcGIS Server. Any other additional licensing roles can be added to your ArcGIS enterprise later. Finally, we've got the ArcGIS Data Store. This is an easy to install and use Esri managed data repository, and it stores any spatial content that's been shared to your portal. In the demo that John did, the data we shared from ArcGIS Maps for Office was stored in the data store for further use. It does not require a DBA. All the administration is handled between ArcGIS Server and the data store. And this makes it a very easy option for organizations who wish to provide this feature service capability within their WebGIS and do web editing and work with data. Now, the ArcGIS Data Store does come in 3 different types: the relational, the tile cache, and the spatiotemporal. The relational data store is used for storing your hosted data. The data that John used in his demo was stored in that relational data store. It can also store any output from analysis tools that are done. The tile cache data store stores cache data that's used for our 3D mapping. So you can use hosted scene layers, and the data is stored in the tile cache data store. Finally, the spatiotemporal data store is used with our ArcGIS GeoEvent server and GeoAnalytics server licensing roles. It can store the results from analysis tools from ArcGIS GeoAnalytics server, and also can work to store real-time data and archive it for you. For the base ArcGIS enterprise deployment, we do require that the relational and the tile cache data store be utilized here. So we talked about all these components, but you might be wondering, how are they all installed? What would you, how do you go about putting them into your system? So the installation process does take some time, so we are going to skip running through all of those installers for you, but we do want to highlight some important parts of the installation wizard that you might run into when you do this on your own time. With the web adapter, like I said, when you're using the IIS version of the web adapter, it will automatically install any missing components that are not found. So our installer will scan your system, we'll check to see if you have IIS or any other necessary components there, and then we'll install them once you hit I agree on that left picture. Next, you have to name your ArcGIS web adapter. By default, it's called ArcGIS. But you can change it to any other name. Typically, we use the name server for ArcGIS Server and portal for ArcGIS. We do require that you have a web adapter for your server and a web adapter for your portal, which we'll go into a bit later. This wizard shows a sample of what the adapter URL will look like, showing the machine name that it's installed on, / and then the web adapter name, followed by any other suffixes needed as you'd like to use your enterprise. Now with Portal, you're asked to set a user that runs the service when installing. What this is a back-end operating system user that controls all of the processes that go on in the background for your portal. This can be a local or a domain account. In this case, it's a local account called ArcGIS. When you finish running the installer, a browser will open on that internal port of 7443 using that URL, and you'll be directed to create the portal once it's finished running the installer. ArcGIS Server lets you set the same type of user for the back-end processes. It's an operating system level user. In this case, it's also a local one called ArcGIS, but it can be a domain username as well. You can also use the same username and password for your server and your portal. And then once you finish running the installer for server, you'll see this URL, which asks you to create the ArcGIS Server site, and it runs on the internal ports used by ArcGIS Server, which is 6443. Lastly is the data store. You also have to provide a operating system user. It can be a local or a domain account. In this case, it's ArcGIS, and it can also be the same as you've used for portal and also for server. Once you finish running the installer, that URL will show up. You'll be asked to register your data store, and that operates on the internal port of 2443. Once you've done that installation on those internal ports, you don't actually really need to use the internal ports again. You'll be accessing everything through the web adapter or through your portal. Now, we're going to use a couple of terms which you might not be familiar with, so we prepared a very short glossary of some key terms that you might be able to go back on if you'd like, if you would like to answer any more questions. So we're going to use the term federated server here. And what this is an ArcGIS server that's been added to the portal. We're going to go a little bit more in depth later, but essentially it will integrate your server into your portal, and you'll be using the portal's security system and user base. Next, we have the hosting server. This is an ArcGIS server that's been federated with your portal, but it's also registered with an ArcGIS data store. Once that's done and you've set that federated server as a hosting server, that allows you to publish hosted feature services and tiles and other features. Finally, we have the ArcGIS web adapter, which we went over, and that's just integrating your server in your portal with your existing web servers. So we've gone into these components, and you might be wondering, sure, I've run the installers, but really what's next? What are the next configuration steps? This slide will lay down all the groundwork that's for the configuration necessary to build the base deployment. So here we have portal, server, and data store, and the web adapters. So the first thing you're going to do once you've installed all these is create the portal. It's a short wizard that we'll run through in a demo shortly. Once you do that, you create your ArcGIS server site, similarly a short wizard, and then you also register your data store with ArcGIS server, ensuring to use the relational and tile cache data store. Next, you're going to register the web adapters. First, we'll do the web adapter for portal. We'll register that web adapter with portal, and then we'll do another web adapter for server and register that with server. Finally, we're going to federate, and that will link everything together. And once this is finished, you have what we call the base ArcGIS enterprise deployment. So we're going to be doing a demo, and this is the kind of setup that we will be using. We're going to have a host name called webgis.esri.com. Those are the components that we'll be working with. And this is just an example of some of the URLs we'll be using to access our ArcGIS Enterprise using this setup. Like I said, in the interest of saving time, we've already gone through the installation and the authorization of portal, server, the data store, and the web adapters. So we're going to do the other steps which I outlined. So, like I said, we've done the installation and authorization, and I'll be working through the next steps needed. Okay, so let me just do this. Sure.
No. So the question was, is that the suggested order that you have to install and authorize the components? No, you're just laying the groundwork down, the install files. You can install those in any order that you'd like. So, and I think just to make sure that we get through the presentation, we can ask that you kind of hold your questions, and then we'll have some time at the end to answer those questions. So, zoom in a little bit.
So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So once I've finished installing Portal, my web browser will open up to this website. If you look at the URL, which you can't really see from there, I'm sorry, it's going through port 7443, which is the internal port, and you're asked to create a new portal or join an existing. We're going to create a new portal. I've already filled in these fields for us, but essentially we're going to establish the portal administrator account. This account will be used to do any administrative tasks on the portal, and you can also configure other administrative users once you've finished doing this. When you hit create, it goes ahead and it creates that portal administrator. Similarly with ArcGIS Server, when you finish running the installer, you get a wizard here to create or join an existing site. We're going to be creating a new site, and we're going to establish the primary site administrator account. So this is the administrative account for ArcGIS Server. Here we're just going to use admin. We're going to go ahead and choose the default directories. You essentially establish folders for storing all of your server content and also for all of the configuration. Once you hit next and you hit finish, it goes ahead and creates the server site. So what I've done is essentially worked with that, and I've made the sites for us. So in Portal, pretending that the site is made, let's go ahead and make sure that works. Well, let's do server first. So this is just a browser error that will show, that you might see when you're working with server or Portal. What's going on is our product installs a certificate that's a self-signed certificate, and it's bound to the host name you're using. Your browser is just telling you that, hey, this is not a trusted certificate, but it's an internal one that's tied to your machine.
Zoom in again? Zoom in a little.
Here we go. So our server manager, the site has been created and we're asked to provide the username and password. I chose admin and admin for this. And this will take us into server manager, where we can work on configuring the server as we want. Similarly with Portal, when we get through and we create the Portal site, we're going to be shown this home page, and we can choose sign in. We'll use the same Portal admin username and password. And that will take us into our organization. Now we still need to register the data store and also the web adapters. So I'm going to go ahead and do the data store now. Let's see these errors. So once the installer for ArcGIS data store is completed, you're asked to configure it. What we're doing here is we're pointing the data store to an ArcGIS server. So we just installed an ArcGIS server on webgis.esri.com. I'm actually going to use the same URL from here, but I'm going to change the number to 6443 because that's the port that server uses. And then I have to provide the administrator username and password. So that was admin and admin. Next, we choose the directory where we're going to store all of our content. I'll choose the default of C ArcGIS data store. And then we have to choose which type we're going to configure. Like I said, we're going to want to work with relational and tile cache. So we choose those two, and we're going to hit next. And then there's a bit of a summarization screen, and we'll hit finish. This will configure the data store. While that's going on, I'm going to work with the web adapters now. So once you've finished installing the web adapter, you'll see this window. It asks you to configure it. As you can see, there's an informative window that lets you know if anything is already being configured. In this case, we're working with Portal. If you look at the URL goes /portal to show that that's the one we're working with. We'll hit Portal. And now we have to provide the URL to our portal, which is Node.js 7443. We're going to do the portal admin URL, our username and password. We'll configure. And we're going to have to do the same thing for server. So I have the server web adapter here. We're going to configure ArcGIS server in this case. We'll choose next. We'll also be connecting to the server URL. So that's the domain over 6443, because that's the server port. We're going to use admin and admin, because that's the credentials for server. And now you'll see this box when you're working with ArcGIS server to enable administrative access through the web adapter. We're going to leave this unchecked. It is a security best practice. And what this means is that you will not be able to get to ArcGIS Server Manager unless you're internally located within the network. We're going to hit configure. Once that's done, you'll see a pop-up that says that it's been successfully configured and you can use this URL to get to your services directory. Once you go here, it looks good and we're not using that internal port of 6443. Now I enabled that, prevent access through the web adapter to Server Manager. So if we try and go to Server Manager through here, we're actually going to get this saying administrative access is disabled and you should contact your administrator. So that means that it's been properly configured. Okay, so over here.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So I've gone through those first 5 steps. I've created the portal, created the server site, I've registered the data store, I've registered the 2 web adapters, and now John will work us through federating ArcGIS server and portal for ArcGIS.
Thank you, Thomas. So the next step that, after you've configured and you've installed and authorized the components and you've configured them is to kind of tie them together. And this is done by federating. So what federating does is it integrates the security of portal and server. So once you federate, portal will control the security and control access to the server and its services. Any existing services on the server site will automatically be added as items to the portal by the and owned by the user who actually did the federation. And any new services that are published will be added as items to the portal and be owned by the user who actually published those services. And the sharing model will control access to the services. If you share a service with nobody, that means only the owner of the item is going to be able to reach the service. If you share a service with a group or the organization, only people part of the group or only people who have a named user within the organization are going to be able to access the service. And if you share a service with everybody, that means that anybody with access to the portal and the server are going to be able to access the service. On the right, you see the interface of the actual federation screen, and there are 4 separate parameters. The first is the services URL. This is going to be the URL that you expect users to use to reach your server and its services. The administration URL is the URL that portal will use to talk to the server. And the username and password are the credentials for any administrator within the server site. This could be a primary site administrator, so that initial administrator account that's used to create the site, or any administrator that has been added after the fact. So once you federate, the next step would be to set it as the hosting server. And the hosting server is the server that will host the content that's automatically copied to the portal into the ArcGIS data store. So this does require that you have a registered relational ArcGIS data store that's registered to the server. And this is going to be important for the standard analysis and geoanalytics tools, so the tools that extend the functionality of your portal. It's important for publishing hosted layers. So what I showed initially in that demo with ArcGIS Maps for Office, that type of functionality is possible when you have a hosting server. It's important and required for batch geocoding. So if you have a list of addresses that you upload to your My Content page or in the web map viewer, a hosting server is required there. And also required for adding shapefiles to a web map. And this is something that we're gonna touch upon a little bit later within the presentation. So what I'd like to do now is go ahead and actually run through federation. Let's get this to duplicate. There it goes. So on the site that Thomas has registered the let's go home. So on the site that Thomas has registered the web adapters and registered the ArcGIS data store, I'm now able to get to the portal homepage through the web adapters, through those normal ports of 80 and 443. I'm signed in as an administrator, so I can go to my organization. And here I have some options to perform some administrative tasks, either add members or edit some settings. So I'm going to click on Edit Settings. And here are some of the different things I can update within this portal. For federation, I'm just going to focus on the Servers tab here. And within the Servers tab, I have the option of validating existing servers, making sure that they're up and running and healthy, and also the option of adding an additional server or a new server. In this case, I'm going to add the services URL is going to be the URL that I want to use, that I expect users to use to reach the ArcGIS server services. In this case, it's going to go through the web adapter. And for the administration URL, I'm going to use that internal URL using port 6443. And again, as Thomas pointed out, I'm not going to be able to use the web adapter for the administration URL because I've disabled administrative access. I'll provide the credentials for an administrator within the server site. In this case, I only have that primary site administrator. And I'll click on Add. So what's happening now is that, again, we're integrating the security models for portal and for server. So now portal is going to control access to the ArcGIS server. Once that's done, you see there is a green check mark indicating everything has gone through. So the next step would be to set the hosting server. And again, this requires the ArcGIS data store to be registered. And the list, if you click on the drop-down, the list is going to be updated with the available federated servers within this portal. So I'm going to select that new one I just federated. And then optionally, I can select to set a geoanalytics server or a raster analysis or image server. Granted, provided I have the right licenses on those machines. But in this case, I'm just going to focus on the hosting server. So I'll go ahead and click Save. And now, this may take some time as it has to validate that a registered data store is successfully registered and it's healthy. Once it goes through, I'll have a full ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. So what I've gone through, and what Thomas has gone through, is we prepared the components is by installing and authorizing them, and again, in no particular order. The next thing we've done is configured the portal. So we've created the portal. We've created the ArcGIS server site. We've registered the ArcGIS data store with the server. And we've registered the web adapters with the portal and the GIS server. Finally, when that's all done, we've gone ahead and federated the ArcGIS server with the portal. And within this step, we're setting it as the hosting server. So we've gone through all these steps manually. And if you're not familiar with configuring the individual components, if this is your first time kind of jumping into the ArcGIS Enterprise realm, this may be, this may seem a little daunting to you. So coming at 10.5.1, we're introducing the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder. And what this does is it's going to simplify the setup and configuration of a single machine ArcGIS Enterprise deployment by asking the minimum number of questions required to get this up and running. So I want to go through a quick demo. Oops, that installed. So when you have the builder available to you, it's going to come in a folder structure similar to this. You'll have, let's go ahead and duplicate. It's going to come in a folder structure similar to this. You'll have the builder executable, as well as a folder full of the setup files. And these are all just the individual setup files that are going to be used to install the software. You have data store, portal, the portal web adapter, server, and the server web adapter. If you click on the builder executable, it brings up the actual ArcGIS Enterprise builder. And here, you can click on Next. You can go through the master agreement, Next. And then the first parameter is where you want to actually install all the software. In the case of doing it manually or individually, you go through the installs, you provide the path to install each component individually. But in this case, you provide one path for all the components to be installed to. Here's where there's a check to make sure that you have 20 gigabytes of disk space available on the machine. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And you can leave it as a default and click Next. Here's where you'll provide the credentials to run for what user will run the processes. So the ArcGIS server Windows service and those kind of system services that have to be installed. And as Thomas showed initially, you can provide the credentials manually when going through, but in this case you provide one set of credentials for all the components. This could be a local account or a domain account. And you click Next. Then you'll provide the path to the authorization files for portal and for server. You click Next, and then you click Install. So this really will greatly simplify the setup and the installation of each of these individual products by doing it all in within one builder. So now on the configuration side, so it's going through. So unfortunately there was a problem with these machines. We had to go ahead and uninstall everything and reinstall everything. So we're going to kind of continue on and then kind of circle back around and show the ArcGIS Enterprise configuration wizard, which will go through and actually create the portal site, create the server site. So we're actually going to revisit this a little bit later and see if it's all done. So Okay, so now you have, you've decided on your deployment strategy. If you're at 10.5.1, you may use the Arc Gis Enterprise Builder, or you may install it manually, but at this point you're ready to start administrating your portal. And this is going to be done through the portal directory admin API, accessible through the web adapter. In this case, ours is portal/portal admin. And this is going to be where you configure security, like if you want to use built-in users or enterprise users. It's going to be where you manage SSL certificates, for example, if you need to trust any certificates from your certifying authority. It's also where you can take a look at the portal logs, so you can monitor the portal health by taking a look at the logs and see if you have to assess or address any issues that come up. And it's also going to be where you authorize additional products like ArcGIS Pro or Insights. So what are the next steps? You set this up, you know how to kind of administer your portal, and now you can start customizing it to the look and feel that your organization wants it to look. You're also going to probably want to add some members. So in this case, you can add enterprise users or built-in members. You can add them either one at a time or in bulk. We'll show that in a second. And you can also customize the homepage. You can update the banner and the background that you see when you actually reach the portal homepage. And you can update some of the portal behavior. And this is by configuring utility services. For example, if you want a custom geocode service within the portal, if you want a custom routing service within the portal to use within web apps or within the web map viewer. And also if you want to use a custom base map gallery. So a lot of organizations have their own base map services that they've curated, and they want to be accessible or easy to use within the base map switcher within applications. So they can easily create a new group, add their own base maps to those groups so that they're available within base map switchers. So as an administrator, I want to go through and perform some of these different operations. So within that site that I have configured, I'm already again signed in as an administrator. And the first thing I want to do is add some members. If I click on Add Members, I have 2 different options, or 3 different options initially of what kind of members I want to add to this portal. You can add enterprise users, either SAML or IWA or Active Directory. But in this case, our portal is using built-in security, so I'm going to leave that option checked and click Next. And then I have 2 different options of how I want to add users to my portal. I can either add them one at a time, in which case I'll provide the credentials and information for each user. And I can either review my addition if there's just a single user, or continually build a list of users I want to add to this portal. The other option is from a file. So I can have a text file that contains information about each user I want to add to this portal. In this case, I've got a first name field, last name field, email, username, password, what role that level will use, and the level. So if I were to browse to that text file, go to Upload and Review, you see it automatically looks at the headers and figures out what information to pull from those headers. And I can go ahead and click Add Members. If I return back to my organization, then those 2 users are going to be added to the portal. What I also like to do is customize the home page for my portal. So within those tabs I skipped over originally, you can customize again the look and feel and functionality. So you can update the description, the logo or the name of your portal, but you can also update the home page. In this case, I'm going to upload a custom image. So I'll browse to an image, in this case on my desktop, for the background. Click OK. And also I want to update the banner. So I can browse to a custom image for the banner as well. And click Add. And also want to update the featured content. So this is going to be the content that's initially displayed within a banner on the home page. And I don't really have any content in this portal yet, so I'm just going to select the Living Atlas analysis layers. And there's some different options that you can select for how to display that. But I'm going to leave all those default. So once I click Save, if I navigate back to the home page, let me zoom out a little bit. You can see I have a new background. that's, and also a new banner. And here is the living analysis, living atlas layers that are available within this featured content. And obviously, as an organization, you may have your own group with the important web maps or applications that you want users to first be met with when they actually reach the portal. So the other thing I want to do as an administrator is, I just set this up. I want to make sure that the hosting server is set correctly, that the federated server is there. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add a shapefile to the web map. And again, this is a useful way to make sure that your ArcGIS Enterprise deployment is set up correctly. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add a layer from a file. And I'm going to browse to a zip shapefile that's on my desktop. This is a zipped up shapefile of all the United States. I'm just going to leave this option to generalize the features selected, and I'll go to import layer. And if this goes through successfully, which it has, that's a good indication again that the ArcGIS Enterprise is set up correctly. You see that I have the options available to me for smart mapping. So I can easily select a different field to display, and it figures out what's the best type of symbology to use for this data. Okay. So we've added members, we've customized the look and feel of the portal. And now it's time that you allow the users to actually connect to the portal. And there's two different ways that someone's going to be able to connect to the portal. The first is just through the portal website, so the portal home app. And this is going to be going through the web adapter, in this case portal is our web adapter name, and then /home at the end. And the other way is for any client applications. And client applications are going to connect to the portal without /home at the end. This is ArcGIS Pro. This is ArcMap. These are the location analytics applications like ArcGIS Maps for Office, and any mobile applications like Collector for ArcGIS or Explorer. So we've obviously gone through a lot of information about how to set up your ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, and the resource, we suggest you take a look at the resources page to get some more information on things that either are unclear or we may have skipped over. For example, there's a topic on the steps involved to set up your ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, from installing to configuring to setting up each site to federating. And there's some other subjects that we touched briefly upon but didn't go into much detail about. For example, licensing, SSL certificates, and upgrade workflows. Technical support is a great resource for you to reach out to if there's something that you find could be improved within the software or some issue you're running into, so they're a great resource to reach out to. And finally, obviously today and tomorrow, we're available in the ArcGIS Enterprise area, so if you have any specific questions or anything that wasn't covered here, feel free to come by and speak to us. Here's some other sessions that you may be interested in, in deploying your ArcGIS Enterprise. The first is architecting your deployment on Thursday, March 9th from 2:30 to 3:30. There's a session available. If you're interested in security, which is obviously, pretty much every organization is going to be, this is going to be something on their minds. There's two different sessions, March 8th from 4 to 5 and March 10th from 1 to 2. And if you're interested in working within the cloud environments, there's two sessions for those, one from Microsoft Azure from 9 to 10 on March 9th, and another for Amazon or AWS from March 9th from 10:30 to 11:30. So those are some good sessions for you to attend. Before I get out of this, let's go ahead and take a look at that builder there. And hopes, well, unfortunately, it's still installing the data store. So if you want, you can stop by the ArcGIS Enterprise island, and if you're really interested in kind of seeing this, we can go through and show you the different windows. Last but not least, please take our survey. We want your feedback about the session, what worked well, what didn't work well, if you have anything that you think it's important to touch on for later sessions. And generally we're really interested in hearing what you think about this this particular session. With that, we have some time for questions. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, we have, in his organization, he has 4 separate boxes for each of the different components, right? So you have, let's say, the web adapter on one, and server on another, and portal, and everything can be on one box. And there's, the only thing you really have to consider are resources. If you have kind of the big enough machine to support portal, server, and data store all on the same machine, then you can go ahead and do that. If you want to set up this kind of tiered architecture because you want to isolate kind of a CPU intensive product like server on its own machine, maybe RAM or disk space, the requirements of the data store for disk space are pretty high, so you want that on a separate machine, then maybe that's a good approach for you to use. But really, if the resources are there for almost all components to be on the same machine, and that's kind of maybe better for an organization to manage one machine instead of 4, then you can definitely do that.
Any other questions?
Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you. And again, if you have any questions that come up later, feel free to stop by the island and or the area, and we can definitely answer them for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.